Good morning all, thank you for joining us today. We'll kick off quite promptly as we are recording the session and that will be available to everyone following the meeting. But we're going to cover a few housekeeping notes before kicking off this morning. If we can go to the next slide, Alice. Thank you very much. First of all, yes, please do use Slido to ask any questions you have. This will allow us to capture all the questions to add to the post-webinar pre-qualification submission frequently asked questions, which will be sent to all participants early next week, and I'll provide the Slido joining instructions shortly. Please note that we only have an hour to get through a lot of content today, which is why we're asking you to submit your questions on Slido. And we've allotted 15 minutes at the end of the session to go through and answer as many of these questions as we can. And any questions not answered in the session will be fully responded to in the pre-qualification submission FAQ, which will follow. This webinar is specific to the pre-qualification submission. Therefore, we ask that you keep your questions related to this document. If you have any other queries relating to market-wide half-hourly qualification, please do email mhhsqualification@elexon.co.uk, and we will ensure that your question gets answered by the correct person. Please do be advised that this meeting is being recorded, and we will be uploading the recording to the MHHS programme collaboration base for all participants to review as needed. And there is a small agenda today, and we have a brief introduction from myself. Then Matt from Elexon and V from the Retail Energy Code will walk us through the worked example of this pre-qualification submission. And this will include the Q&A session where Matt and V will be answering the questions that you are submitting on Slido. And finally, I will be closing the meeting, hopefully with that Q&A. We've lost the slides for the minute, but we'll crack on for the time being. The webinar is being hosted for there we go, that's back now. The webinar is being hosted for non-SIT suppliers, non-SIT data services and non-SIT meter equipment managers, as well as any new entrant LDSOs, as they are required to provide a pre-qualification submission for their market-wide half-hourly qualification. The pre-qualification submission is a vital document in the MHHS qualification process, as the submission will include all of the information that code bodies need to make an informed judgment on the participant readiness and suitability to be allocated to a particular qualification wave.
Sorry, George, I think you may have gone on mute.
Apologies. Oh, I don't know how that's happened.
You're back now, no worries.
Yeah, I'll kick back off on the agenda slides there. So the webinar today is being hosted for non-SIT suppliers, non-SIT data services and non-SIT meter equipment managers, as well as any new entrant LDSOs, as they are required to provide a pre-qualification submission for their market-wide half-hourly qualification. The pre-qualification submission is a vital document in the MHHS qualification process, as the submission will include all the information that code bodies need to make an informed judgment on participants' readiness and suitability to be allocated to a particular wave. This will also assist code bodies in understanding the resource and testing capacity required to support each qualification wave, and code bodies will work collaboratively with participants to ensure that they are in their suitable qualification wave. Please, sorry, next slide. Please do join Slido now. Please go to slido.com and enter PQS where prompted, and I'll put these instructions in the webinar chat in case they are required. But without further ado, I'll pass you to Matt and V to walk you through the worked example.
Good morning, Chef everyone. Perfect. Right, there's the what we're doing today, I'm just going through the government vacancy. Yes.
Matt, sorry to interrupt. We can't hear you very well.
Yeah,
Your
apologies,
sound
there's,
is really bad.
yeah.
Very bad.
Actually, you can always use these again.
Right, is that better?
Yeah, that's much
Yes,
better.
that's much
Oh,
better.
perfect. Right, okay, so what I'm doing today is just taking you through the general section. So this will be 4.1 of the pre-qualification submission. So what we need to do from an organisation point of view, so this is where you fill it in from an organisation's perspective. So it would be your company name, your registered company house, the list of MPIDs. So if you've got multiple roles with multiple MPIDs, this is where you would list them all. So that is for your where you would currently hold those. So this would be, so if you're a supplier, a data aggregator and a data collector, this is where you would hold that information. You'd put the relevant MPIDs. The next box, what it does, it asks you for which ones you're kind of taking over. So which ones are you keeping under the MHHS and which ones you kind of want to be qualified. The next lot would take you through the existing MPIDs that you don't want to carry over. So those are the ones that you want to go through market exit, or you no longer want to use those in the new world. What we've done here is, as you can see in our worked example, I've got 2 MPIDs, and then I've only taken 1 MPID across in the new world, and then exiting 1. And then through the exit, I've also we've also put an explanation of how we're exiting that. Then there's obviously the key contacts. So there was a couple of questions about the key contact. So this primarily is the person that's going to be the day-to-day person dealing with this document, and then they'll be later on talking about who's responsible. So then we've obviously got here to confirm that all the information submitted within this form is accurate, and then on what the date it has been submitted. If we can go next slide, please. And then here we'll talk you through the qualification approach. Now, as you can see here in the red, what we've done is we've added guidance for those those parts in red. So we've obviously here we've got the list of roles responsible. So you obviously that would be, maybe it's the director or whoever it is, and then with a list of how they're involved or how they are accountable. So it says please detail the relevant company director within your organisation who will sign off the MHHS quad on behalf of the company, and then also provide any details of any other senior stakeholders accountable for the delivery and oversight of the MHS implementation as relevant. Then it moves on to what senior management level oversight. So here, this is where you provide details around the risk is kept under review, including triggers and threat resources and the frequency of reviews. And then finally, how have you identified all items that are impacted by MHS, and if not, how do you and when do you intend to do this? So here it says, please detail how you plan to meet those resources, including IT infrastructures, IT systems, staff at all levels and functions, etc., and then requirements to operate changes delivered by MHS programme. If we could then move to the next slide.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matt. I'm going to take you all through this these sections. Just before we start, I think one of the main things is the pre-qualification submission itself is to help the core bodies understand how you're implementing the MHHS changes required and what sort of governance you have within your organization. This basically is for us to ascertain when are you more likely to be ready to undertake qualification testing, so we can plan up the qualification wave capacities accordingly. So just looking at the first question that we've got on the screen, that's in relation to your change management approach on how you're implementing MHHS changes and also keeping on top of changes as design changes are released, how you're ensuring that the scope of your PET and your KT, all of that is taking those changes into account, and you're replanning and rebaselining your approach based on the releases. So in this question, what we're expecting you to do is give us a high-level overview of how the overall change management process within your organization works, primarily pick out what kind of oversights available how do you assess changes that are like the requirements that are coming in, and then take them through build and test so that there's assurance that things will work before you release them for implementation. In our example over here, we've taken an example organization and given some sample. We understand that for your own organization, these there might be different degrees of oversight, different degrees of approaches that you may apply. So again, we expect you to basically, like, the purpose, like why are we asking you this question is basically to get confidence on how robust are your procedures when it comes to assessing the design requirements and the changing design requirements as the interim releases are prepared. So again, the more detail you can provide us to give us confidence in that will be helpful in this section. Similarly, the next question that we've got on the screen is around whether you'll have any concurrent system or process changes that overlap with MHHS, but may not necessarily be related to MHHS delivery. Just as an example, this could be something like you might be changing your CRM system, which doesn't necessarily impact your MHHS processes, but the trigger coming in for your MHHS processes might come from a different system. So again, things like that, it's good for the code bodies to be aware of these things that may coincide and may impact your PIT timeliness. The sooner we know about these things, the more prepared we can be. So again, in this section, we ask you to detail out those things so that code bodies have early visibility of things that might be coming down the line. In terms of the next two questions, the first one's basically like just as part of the PQS, we're asking you to submit your PIT approach and plan. So please attach it and also confirm that you have attached it here. This last question is around, it's for suppliers only, it doesn't apply to other roles, where a supplier is going to be applying for exemption from the UMS requirements for MHHS qualification. We're asking them to indicate that over here. So a yes would mean that you are not going to be doing any UMS testing during qualification. If you go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the next section is around your PIT timeline. So we're firstly asking you whether you've started your execution, and if you've not started your execution, when your current planned PIT execution start date is. We've then also asked you how are you gaining oversight on your PIT delivery. And again, we've got some examples of supporting documents organizations can provide when you're responding to the PQS. And yeah, we do anticipate your PIT approach and plan may evolve as you progress your development activity. But we're asking for visibility at this point so that it helps us understand how you're implementing your PIT, helps us highlight any gaps that we might see early on in the day. And again, if things do change from this PIT approach and plan you've submitted with your PQS to us now, please keep us posted. We don't want you to wait until you submit your first first code submission, or when you're looking to enter QT, that we at that point identify an element should have been covered in your PIT which wasn't. So that's why we're asking early visibility and ongoing engagement to mitigate risks of any surprises at the end. Within the PIT, we're asking participants to use the RTTM template that's issued by the program as part of the PIT guidance. This is being updated, so a new version should be available soon. So we're basically ensuring that parties use that so that the reviews can be consistent and we have the information that the code bodies need to make certain decisions available to us. The third question the fourth question on this page is around your expected timelines for PIT completion. Again, this is to help us plan by when we can expect your PIT evidence to come. And if there's any risks that you anticipate that this is the date we're planned and we're working with, but we think these are the things that may impact this date, please document in the later section, which is around risks and controls, which is section 4.6 of the document. In terms of what percentage of PIT scope have you completed, this is again, we require an indication to help us gain some confidence as to how likely are you going to be to meet the date that you are saying for PIT completion. So if someone was to say they're going to be completing PIT in June and their PIT like June 24 and their PIT scope is 0%, that would raise concerns to us. So that is what the purpose of these questions is. If we move to the next slide, please. I think Matt's
So
taking
now,
us through this. Yeah.
right, so thanks, B. So what I'm now going to do is talk you through the qualification wave allocation. So in 4.2.3, we talk about the qualification wave allocation. So in this, please provide your first and second wave allocation preference. So it'd be you just need to detail both. So if you have so just so that we're aware for the first and second. We then go on to, so please confirm when you're targeting to start your MHHS migration. This would just indicate of what dates you're aiming for to start migration, so we can then, as we'll be able to factor that in when it comes to your wave allocation. And then the personnel or the personnel that is for the key contacts regarding your migration. So these data will then be shared with the MHHS Program Migration Control Centre. So who will be the responsible in terms of migrating. Then it will be confirmed whether you've entered any commercial arrangements with any agents to work with under the MHHS arrangement. So this is relating to suppliers only. So this would be kind of your MEMS or your data services. Obviously, you don't have to have these in place. We're just trying to have an indication of, are you kind of getting those discussions with those participants, and just kind of to see where you are, where you're at. The same way with have you entered any commercial, whether you've entered any commercial arrangements. So here is please provide details of all supplier agents you intend on using. So this should cover data services and metering services for all market segments you intend to operate in, and then also include any relevant information such as such as any MPITs. Obviously here you can still say NA, still under negotiation, because obviously we wouldn't want you to disclose anywhere you haven't actually got that signed. And then has any supplier agent been factored into your target date? So they are factored. So for example, is the agent you intend on using going to be ready for your migration the date you intend to migrate on? And then it says also, please provide any further information you believe the code body should consider when determining your wave allocation. So in this section, please highlight info you'd like to be considered, such as a risk of large suppliers not having enough time for migration, risk of other suppliers placing reliance on not being able to complete by M14 if the supply goes for a late wave, risk of agents not being in the same or earlier waves, which could also delay migration, and then expecting to place full reliance on someone who did testing in SIT or earlier QT, so you can proceed at pace. Obviously, those are the ones that we have just those used, and it wouldn't, as that we wouldn't necessarily that wouldn't necessarily change the wave allocation, but it's just to highlight any risks that you have come across. Next slide.
Brilliant. I can take us through this one. So section 4.3 asks about your system architecture. So over here, we've provided some guidance text, and I think I've seen some Slido questions where people are asking if these slides will be available. So we'll share the worked out example document itself from which we've grabbed these screenshots, which will give you some guidance. The stuff in red is the guidance as to what kind of details to include, what kinds of pitfalls to avoid, and then also the other stuff, which is sample examples we've developed, again, for your organization's context that might differ slightly, but again, the examples will be available for you for reference should you need it. In terms of the system architecture, what we basically want you to do is we want you to show us as detailed as you can within that system architecture. What are the various components that are coming together, whether they're existing systems or new systems, or whether they're existing systems, like within the existing systems itself, whether there's systems that will undergo some changes as a result of MHHS or will not be changed as a result of MHHS. We would also like you to explain how these various systems are procured, whether they're hosted in-house by your hosted and maintained by your organization or by a third party, and how the changes for each of these systems are being developed. Commonly, we often see that people refer to certain systems and assume that the code bodies will know what the purposes and the functions of those systems are. A good response would detail all the, not assume any knowledge and give as much of description as possible for the reader to understand what each component is, or what function each component is performing, how it's coming together, and how it's being built and tested and then maintained for live operation. In this section, we'd also if you are an organization that's intending to place reliance on another organization, it would be good if you can highlight how your end architecture for live operation will differ from the organization you're placing reliance on, so that we can have early visibility and can tell you that these are additional elements within your pit that we would expect to be tested, that you might not be factoring in right now. Then again, we've got some detail on this page. Hopefully it makes sense to people. If you do have, when you're completing this this section, if you do have any questions, do reach out to us. General approaches, please give as much detail as possible so that we can build a full picture. And yeah, with that, I will ask you to just move to the next slide, please.
So in 4.4 is the place and reliance submission. So in this section, we discussed any organisation you're placing reliance on, or if you're delegating to test on your behalf of your organisation. This is to meet your testing requirements for MHHS qualification in part or whole. If you are intending to complete all testing requirements using internal systems and resources, then you only need to respond to question 4.4.1. So if you're not intending to actually place reliance on anyone, you would just then put in the 4.4.1, no, and then you wouldn't actually need to fill any more of the document out. However, if you were to intend to place reliance, you would then fill this document in. So as you can see, it's whether you're placing reliance, yes. Have you entered in the agreement to facilitate sharing of testing evidence to meet your MHHS requirements? So if it's a yes, and then if it's no, just please clarify when these arrangements are expected to be in place. And then just for clarification, where a programme participant is placing reliance on testing completed by another participant or a third party provider is testing on its behalf, this is expected to be fully agreed between all parties involved. And then in terms of 4.4.2, so this is detailing the organisation completing the testing that would be used for placing reliance. So here you would just list the MPID that you are placing reliance on. So for here, we were placing reliance on a supplier. And then also in which route is the testing for the organisation expecting to take. So if they're just a SIT participant, you can just put their SIT. However, if they're not a SIT participant, just indicate the QT wave that they're expecting to target. Next slide, please. So here it details details of the organisation completing the testing on behalf of. So here you've 4.3. You've got the third party IT provider, and then the relationship with the applicant submitting this. So this is the IT systems provider. Is there a current agreement in place? And then do you intend for the agreement to continue during migration and live operations following full transition? So I know that with some of the place and reliance, it could be just place and reliance on that system. However, if it's a managed service, that relationship may continue after. And then here we've got the RACI. So this is where you've got your role, the role that the third party roles. So that's where the party you're placing reliance on, and then the third party IT provider. So here you've got the adapter. So for yourselves, you'll always be accountable for any of the attesting because it's been on your behalf. However, the code compliance you'll always be responsible for, and then you just need to detail who's going to be responsible for the testing, and then where you've obviously got the S is the supported, because that's the supplier who's the qualification testing you're placing reliance on. And next slide, please. And then further on, you've got the supporting information following the RACI. So here we've detailed the system and software hosting and maintenance. So it's elaborate on the specific system or software within your IT landscape for which the RACIs may vary. The system design and build. So it's elaborate on the specific systems and software within your IT landscape. And then the pre-integration testing, as here, it may exactly be the same. So as we can see in our worked example, we've put as above, however, it may differ. The qualification testing, the defect management and migration and operational business functionality. So here we can see that we've obviously you will have access to, just to let you know that along with the slide pack, the webinar, and you will also receive this worked example in a PDF format, so you will see that as well. And then if we do next slide.
Thank you. So this section is section 4.5, where we have used the pre-qualification submission to gain information around how you're preparing for certain things that need to be in place before you're qualified. Normally, we would use the performance assurance arrangements under both BSc and REC to gain assurance over these areas. But just to reduce the number of information requests going out to parties, we've decided to club this with the PQS. Just for clarity, the readiness over here will not impact your QT wave allocation. However, like based on this is going to help us assess how ready you're going to be to implement the changes that you need to implement for various different program milestones before your qualification. And if there's any concerns that we get out of this process, we'll use the existing performance assurance framework to address those. The questions that we ask here are, first of all, it's for all market roles. It's asking you whether you have implemented and tested the changes that are required for DTN to accommodate the new market roles that MHHS is introducing. So once migration to MHHS starts, and you will start receiving DTN messages from the new role codes. So it is to make sure that your systems don't reject those messages and are able to validate and process those messages from the new market roles. Again, over there, we'd like to understand, like for all of these questions, we'd like to understand what activities you're doing to prepare yourselves and ensure that you're ready to operate in the system. So again, activities you're doing, the type of oversight you have, and all of that information would be useful in this section. The next part is applicable only to MEMS. So we've not covered in this example, but for MEMS will have a specific requirement where they need to route meter technical details to the new market roles. Again, it's just ensuring that MEMS have applied those within the case. So if you are a MEM, you would be required to answer that question. The expectation would be similar to the examples we've got here. The third sub-point within this question asks whether you have updated your systems to be able to support the migration processes, and both forward migration as well as reverse migration. So again, it's basically understanding, like we require acknowledgement that you've seen the migration design and understand what roles you will need to play to support migration activity for the program before your qualification. And then finally, from M8, which is March next year, the supply number format changes are going to go into effect. So it's again for the record manager to basically understand that you have made those changes and are doing the activities you need to be doing for the go live of those changes. So these are examples that we've got there. Again, based on how your organization is managing these changes, your supporting evidence and the type of information you provide may differ. But again, we ask you, wherever possible, please do provide supporting evidence that we can use to validate the responses you've provided. So that will just save us coming back to you and asking for more. Thank you. With that, next slide, please.
So for 4.6, which is the risk and mitigation, and 4.7, which is the contextual information. So in this section, please provide details of risk associated with your MHHS implementation, including any risks that may manifest as a result of placing reliance or those which impact your qualification testing readiness. And then also please provide any mitigations you have put in place to manage these risks. So we just have a few examples here. And then in terms of any contextual information, so in this section, please provide any further information that the code bodies may need to consider while assessing your pre-qualification submission. For example, where certain DIP messages are optional, and please indicate whether you intend to use those DIP messages. So for here, we've also talked about a UMS. So as the supplier that we're not looking to operate in the UMS MPAS market. However, we do currently have MPANs, and we're saying what we're going to do to mitigate those. So in terms of so if there is anything else you think that we need to know, you just need to provide that in there. And then with that, I'll hand over to George.
Thank you for that, Bea and Matt. That was very helpful and beneficial to customers. Sorry, just because I can hear you. There we go. So we will be answering the Q&A now. So I'll be posing those questions to Bea and Matt. We've had loads of questions in, so if we're unable to respond to all of those now, we're going to be providing that in the FAQ, which will be coming. A few of the questions asked are relating to the slides, the worked example, and the supporting documentation, which is supporting the PQS. That will all be made available alongside the recording. That's going to be made available tomorrow afternoon, and we'll follow that up with an email as well to let you know where to find that information. So yeah, there's a few questions around that. I'm going to go through the questions in order of popularity. So the second most popular question after the slides and worked example is in relation to systems architecture. Is that our entire estate of systems, or just those that will be covered in PIT evidence and qualification testing?
So I can take that. So our definition would be the end-to-end architecture that you're going to be needing for your MHHS delivery. The specific definition itself is in the PIT guidance. But just to give you an overview, what we're expecting is the end-to-end systems, when we talk about to deliver your MHHS requirements, that would also include any systems from which trigger flows will come, or any systems to which the trigger flow will go to start or end a process. So that is our expectation. We're not asking you for unrelated systems which might be to do with other code obligations or are not being touched by MHHS processes at all. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Fantastic, thank you, Bea. Will the qualification code bodies engage directly with the third-party suppliers that suppliers are placing reliance on? So that's for the provision of testing evidence, for example.
So I think it will probably depend on a case-by-case basis, but in most cases, like, we're asking you for the details of your third parties and the organizations you're placing reliance on, so that we can have those arrangements in place. The specifics of how those interactions will work for qualification testing, we'll detail those out into the qualification approach and plan and the annex, which is related to qualification testing. But again, we want to work with parties to make sure the process is as streamlined as possible and we're not creating busy work. So yeah, we'll take that into account.
Thank you. If we are placing reliance, do we just tell you about the PIT testing done by the organisation we're placing reliance on?
So again, it'll depend. So like, there might be elements of PIT that you'll be placing reliance on the third party on, or like another code qualified organization. In those cases, we want you to tell us what parts of PIT you're going to be placing reliance on. However, there might be other elements of PIT which might differ depending on your organization setup that you may need to do yourself. As an example, it could be whilst for functional testing that for systems that you're procuring from a third party that you'll later host within your own environment, you can rely on functional testing, but you may need to do non-functional testing with it once the system's been set up within your own environment. All of that will be the expectation. So again, tell us what you are intending to place reliance on, and we'll validate that working with you.
Fantastic. And in relation to the company director for sign-off, do we need to have it as a company director for the QAD, but not for the PQS? Or is it the same individual for both?
So from a you mute. So sorry. So it would need to have for the QAD needs to be a company director, but the PQS doesn't. This is because the QAD is kind of the overarching qualification document, whereas the PQS is just a supporting document for your qualification. So the idea was that you can just provide the details of who would be signing it off, and then in the actual qual itself would be the person that signs it off. I know it's slightly different with the REC because that can be delegated, but from our point of view, from a BSc, that has to be the company director that can also be identified by Companies House.
Fantastic, thank you. Have the code bodies approved these worked examples, so would be satisfied with this as content as an actual submission, this level of detail?
Sorry, I muted myself. I can take that. So first of all, this is not an actual organization. This is a hypothetical organization that we've used. So I appreciate like the level of detail for every organization may differ. You might have fewer details on some of the things that we fleshed out versus you might have more detail in other areas. But yes, this worked example has been developed by the code bodies. So you can take this as this is what the expectation is. But again, please, you have a lens of your own organization when you're responding to it, because the main thing is going to be if there's not sufficient detail, we'll just have to come back to you and clarify things, which just elongates that process of wave allocation. So more detail you can provide now, better, and making sure that that fits your organization's context.
Fantastic, thank you. So this is relating to parties that have more than one MPID in their organisation. If they have one MPID in SIT and one in qualification testing, do you only need to fill out the PQS for the qualification MPID?
Yes.
Yes, so it is only the ones relating to the ones that's going to go through the non-SIT route. So if you do have, obviously you can make us aware in the PQS that you have got an MPID in SIT, but the idea is that this is just for non-SIT MPIDs.
Do the code bodies have the resource to review all the submissions ahead of wave allocation? And is the plan still for the 28th of June at the latest?
So yes, we do have the resources to stick to the plan. I don't remember the date off the top of my head, so apologies. Yeah. But yes, it's all in the qualification approach and plan. Sorry, Matt, you wanted to add something?
No, I was going to say the same thing. I can't remember the exact date, but yeah, we do have the resource.
And the dates are there in the qualification approach and plan. So what we've said over there, we'll stick to those dates.
And when will we have a document outlining what types of evidence is expected for PIT and QT? And will examples be added to the PIT guidance and the QAMP?
We can take this one back. I know that the PIT guidance has been issued for consultation. So again, if parties require specific examples in certain areas, please do include that in your consultation responses. And again, from a qualification process point of view, we're trying to give you as many examples for things that we need to do. So like we've got this for the PQS webinar now. The QAD, we're planning to host something similar for the QAD once that template has been finalized, just to walk you through what the code body's expectation is. So again, in that, we'll try and cover as best possible what our expectations are. So, yeah.
So can suppliers be exempt from other requirements, such as those as prepayment?
I think this has been discussed at QWG previously, and I don't think this particularly relates to the PQS. But I think it was in September that we discussed, we'd asked for from suppliers on what are the different types that they would want qualification to be restricted on, and we'd taken those for consideration. Answer over here is that your supply qualification and supply licenses are not just like we aren't able to restrict those by market segments or meter types that you may be operating. So expectation is that for all processes, like supplier should be able to do all obligations for a supplier which is there within the BSc and the REC.
With a caveat that obviously with the UMS,
yeah.
the UMS had an acceptation, and that was only because of that was the main one that everyone requested, and we took that to BSc PAB for their comment, and then we have made changes to the BSc to ensure that we had the sufficient in place to make sure it was mitigated.
Okay, so once the pre-qualification submission has been submitted, will the code bodies provide feedback and ask for new info as required? And is there a SLA for our responses?
So over from the 26th April deadline for parties to submit their PQS, over the next 2 months, we will be reviewing things, and we'll be reaching out to parties on a as needed basis to engage with them. If you don't hear from us, that's possibly good news, but we will be making contact directly with parties wherever we need either clarification or any additional information to be able to assess your PQS completely.
So, and we've had a question in about the acronyms being used, and if there's a table available for understanding these. I will put that into the FAQ, so that will be available next week for everyone who's attended.
Brilliant, thank you.
Sorry, the questions keep jumping around. For supply number change, which is section 4.5, why does this need to be in by the 7th of March if it is only valid for migrated accounts?
Sorry, can you say the question again, please? Because I missed part of it.
So for the supply number change, section 4.5, why does this need to be in by the 7th of March? And if it is only valid for migrated accounts?
So, I mean, that was something that I think was consulted on through the rec change process where this was proposed. And I think it's based on that consultation and the decision by the authority. So unfortunately, that is outside the scope of this PQS. But yeah, that decision is there with the rec change documentation itself. You can see the authority decision as well as all the processes that went through to come up with the solution that's being implemented.
So we've had a question. We are an EU-based supplier, not registered in UK Companies House. Do we put in the EU country registered details?
Yes, you would. So it would be the one that it's the one that you are registered in. So yes.
And where change management differs between multiple systems used to support the business, how do you want that information to be provided? And should this be qualification testing in scope systems only?
So first, I'll answer the first part first. So if you have if your change management approach differs by system, split that question out. So basically for a subset, like it could be certain systems you might be procuring from a third party. So you're reliant on the third party's procedures for system change management. Please reference those, and then there might be a subset of systems that you're maintaining yourself. Again, that might have a different approach. So split the answer out into sections like that. When you say QT scope, yes, but technically I would not restrict it to QT scope, but call it the end-to-end architecture within your MHHS scope. So if any systems within that have a different approach, please break your answer into different sections.
Fantastic. Sorry, I've seen that there's two questions that have been missed where the questions have been jumping around. So for evolution of the PIT approach and plan, can we validate that the non-functional requirements and migration stages might be less known given they are later?
We acknowledge that. So what we're asking parties to do is tell us the view you have to date, and between now and as you're executing your PIT, keep us posted as things are changing. The main purpose behind all of this is so that we don't have any surprises towards the end, which would then delay your ability to start QT. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
And then for migration, is it okay to prove only estimates as full plans might not be known yet, especially around dates and system updates?
Again, our expectation is give us the best picture that you have currently, and like also indicate what confidence level you have. If you know of certain risks that can impact those dates or volumes, please highlight those within the document itself, so all of that can be tracked and we have the full picture.
And then there was a few more on change management. I believe you answered this one in relation to does change management apply to applications and business processes or just IT application systems in scope for QT?
So, well, when we look at change management, we look at the whole picture of everything from your IT changes to how you're going to be updating your business processes towards the end. The PQS is more around checking your testing readiness. So you could be more focused on your IT systems, particularly here. However, within your QAD, you'll need to give us the full picture. So if you've got the full picture now, might as well give it now, because it helps you get that review done before your QAD submissions due.
And then should change management include defect handling, or is it only to cover the changes being made to support QT for market-wide half-hourly assessment?
So it should include defect handling as well. So any changes that are required either to fix defects or as a result of any interim releases of design. Yeah, all of that, if you can cover, please.
If an organisation places full reliance on a PIT and SIT party, will there be any testing for them to do at all?
So those are sorry, go for it, Matt.
No, I was so I think the idea is yes, but I think what we'd need to do is to understand the scope of both of those first before we could actually agree to anything. So as we will need to make sure that the actual scope of qualification, the scope of PIT and SIT has been covered to ensure that whether your participants' requirements have been met, and that work can't really be done until the scope's been mapped out yet.
Yeah, and just to add over that, the purpose of the PQS is to understand what your placing reliance proposals are, and whether there's any gaps that need to be addressed as part of considering those placing reliance proposals. We will later on, like the scoping piece, as Matt said, will be done once we know what that party has tested versus what your testing requirements are, and whether they're sufficiently covered. All of that will happen as part of the qualification testing scoping. There will be more detail in Annex 2 of the QA&P, so we encourage parties to refer to that as well, to get a better picture of how that scoping piece will work.
We'll just keep on PIT for the time being. We've had 2 quick questions come in relating to the PIT guidance and when this will be shared for consultation.
So the PIT guidance has been issued with the QWG papers, I think on Tuesday. So please have a look, and it's being taken to the QWG meeting next week for discussion. So that there is an agenda item related to that, as well as this formal consultation, I believe that's on. Which it might follow, but there's an agenda item. So please refer to the QWG papers as well as the attachments that have gone out with them.
Yep.
And then, do we need to name the company that we're placing reliance on, or the managed service?
So if you're getting a third party to test on your behalf, it's the third party you mentioned. But if the third party is testing on behalf of another one of their clients, either in SIT or in a QT wave, please let us know which that organization is, especially if it's QT. Like, we need to ensure that when we're doing the allocation, if you're going to be placing reliance on another organization, we need to make sure that they've at least completed testing in the same wave or an earlier wave than you for the placing reliance to work. So yeah. And again, for answers to these questions, we encourage you to work with your third parties who will facilitate those discussions as to who's participating in testing when and how placing reliance will work.
If an organisation has a number of MPIDs for their supplier role, can they progress different MPIDs through different waves, i.e. their residential through one wave and their I&C through another?
You want to? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to answer that, Matt?
Yeah, I was going to say,
okay.
yeah. I think the idea is that we would have taken all MPIDs at the same through the same wave, because I think if your MPIDs are different, so if you aren't kind of having the same systems and same processes for different MPIDs, then I guess yes, we could look at moving them in the different waves, but then we would need to probably have a separate PQS for each of those MPIDs, because the idea is that as an organisation you would be going through as one. Therefore, if you were going to do through different waves, we would need to know kind of the difference in more detail. However, if it was just the same MPID with all the same information, we would just take it through the same wave.
And I'll just add, so under the rec, the qualifications assigned at a legal entity level. So our preference would be that all MPIDs go at the same time, so that that qualification can be granted at the same time. However, we do understand that parties may want to do things like you may want to have a bit of flexibility for the business model that you're operating. We have this scenario captured within the qualification assessment qualification approach and plan document. So in one of those edge cases that we've sort of described within Appendix B, this specific situation is mentioned there. So please have a look at that as well. But yes, as Matt says, if you want, like, you can submit separate PQSs saying our preferences are separate, and then we can have that discussion from there on.
So for programme participants that are not contracted yet with a third party for a given role, is the only option to qualify an MPID via qualification testing, or is it still possible to place reliance?
Sorry, can you say that again, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So for programme participants that are not contracted yet with a third party for a given role, is the only option to qualify an MPID via qualification testing, or is it still possible to place reliance?
Okay, so firstly, even to place a reliance, you need to join a qualification testing wave. So like, you either need to be in SIT or in qualification testing, and the other party you're placing reliance on also needs to be in QT or SIT. There is the other option where a participant decides they don't want to qualify through MHHS qualification and they want to target the enduring qualification later on in the day. Again, that it's up to the organization to determine what's suitable for them. However, there are sanctions that have been outlined in the Annex 4 of the qualification approach and plan that would apply where organizations haven't qualified by M14. So please be aware of all of that information whilst you're making these decisions. And yes, so the expectation is please submit a PQS stating which QT wave you'd like to be in. And even if you're not targeting any of these and targeting enduring instead, please do tell us that so that we know what your organization's plans are.
Does the company director highlighted in the pre-qualification submission have to be referenced at Companies House?
Yeah.
Yes. So okay,
Yeah.
I can explain why we're asking you that information. We're asking you that information so that later on we can use that to validate, who's signing off your code, who's signing off the various supporting documents. So all of that information around the various, the company's director as well as the senior leadership team. All of that information is basically to validate that stuff. So yeah, it would be good if they match.
And then relating to the PIT references in section 4.2.2, can clarification be given on this, as PIT is completed several times for different test phases throughout the delivery?
So our expectation is your full PIT, like organizations can split their testing for PIT into several different phases. However, we want the overview of everything that you're intending to do. And I think as I've answered a previous question, we want to know what your plans are as of now or as of 26th of April. And as those change, we would like you to keep us apprised of what those changes are, where things like, we appreciate that certain aspects of non-functional testing, operational testing will get flushed out more as you progress through your PIT later in the coming months. So tell us what your view is now and keep us posted of how that's evolving.
Thank you for that. I will just say that we are approaching the end of the session. I'll remind you all that the webinar recording, the slides and the worked example will be available on the collaboration base tomorrow afternoon. And the FAQ, so that's all the questions we've gone through this afternoon, as well as any that we haven't answered, will all be put into an FAQ document added to the one that was sent out prior to the meeting and delivered next week. We've got 50 questions in there at the moment. We'll be answering all of those, or where applicable, we'll be combining similar questions together. But yes, you do have availability to keep putting questions in there if you have any burning questions off of the back of the discussions that we've had today.
Yep, and I will just, before we close, I'll just send one more reminder. The PQS submission deadline is 26th April at 5 p.m. and the details are all there within the pre-qualification submission page on the MHHS collaboration portal. So yeah, please do note that deadline and make sure you provide a submission before that or on time.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining today. It's been a fantastic session and hopefully you've all felt the benefit. But yeah, thank you again, and we'll be uploading the information tomorrow and early next week.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.